In the heat of battle, the young Aztec Emperor Cuauhtémoc stood defiantly on a causeway as the forces of Hernán Cortés closed in on Tenochtitlan, the magnificent capital of the Aztec Empire. After a valiant but ultimately futile defense, Cuauhtémoc was captured, marking the end of an era for the mighty Aztecs. As he was brought before Cortés, a complex exchange of respect and enmity unfolded, symbolizing the dramatic shifts that would soon engulf both the Spanish conquistadors and the indigenous populations. The aftermath was an absolute bloodbath and changed the socio-political and cultural fabric of the society that was left behind. So, how did the Spanish colonialists attack the Aztec Empire? Which was the ultimate battle that led to the fall of the Mesoamerican Empire? And what exactly happened to the conquistadors and the indigenous people after the Spanish Empire's victory? Watch this video until the end to get all the answers and other interesting details about the Spanish conquest of the Americas. Hernán Cortés played the main role in the Aztec Empire falling into the hands of the Spanish. Born into a less privileged family in Medellin, Spain in 1485, Cortés was driven by a desire to discover the riches of the unexplored world. His first expedition was to Hispaniola, followed by Cuba, where he served as magistrate before being chosen to lead an expedition to the mainland. Although the expedition was called off at the last moment due to Cortés's enmity with Cuba's governor, Diego Velázquez, he ignored the order and set sail. He overcame various obstacles, including attempts to arrest him. His focus now shifted to attacking and defeating the Aztec Empire, and for this, Cortés played an intelligent move: alliance with the locals. The partnership with indigenous factions allowed Cortés to win one battle after another and eventually lay siege to Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, was built on islands in Lake Texcoco. Cortés planned to besiege the city and trap the Aztecs within its walls, cutting off supplies and reinforcements. He increased his mobility on the lake by assembling 13 sloops, which played a crucial role to win the final battle against the Aztecs. The Aztec forces launched more than 1,000 canoes against Cortés's sloops, but a favorable breeze helped the Spaniards to overturn or capture them, winning the first battle on the lake. As the siege tightened, the Spanish forces moved closer to Tenochtitlan, limiting the supplies and reinforcements to the Aztecs. The Spanish, on the other hand, received fresh troops and supplies from Veracruz, a city established by Cortés earlier during his campaign. This logistical advantage played a significant role in the eventual fall of the Aztec capital. After getting further closer to Tenochtitlan, Cortés ordered 3 simultaneous advances towards the city. On August 13, 1521, after a prolonged and brutal siege, Tenochtitlan fell to the Spanish forces. The Aztecs, worn out by starvation, disease, and continuous assaults, could no longer hold their defenses. Cuauhtémoc, the Aztec ruler at the time, was imprisoned, marking the end of a war that changed modern-day Mexico forever. The fall of the Aztec Empire unleashed a wave of Spanish atrocities on the indigenous populations. Cortés's campaign was marked by extreme brutality. Approximately 240,000 indigenous people were killed, with thousands of bodies floating in the canals of Tenochtitlan. The Tlaxcalans, allies of the Spanish, continued their attacks even after the Aztecs had surrendered, resulting in widespread slaughter and destruction. Women were raped, children were stabbed to death, and precious items were looted. When atrocities slowed down, the Spanish crown began the colonization process and named the recently captured area New Spain. Bureaucrats and officials were sent to Mexico, which would run the affairs of the newly established colony till 1810, when Mexicans began their fight for independence. The defeat of the Aztecs brought about significant changes in property, culture, and social structures. Before the Spanish colonial rule, the winner of a war would impose their own culture and gods on the losing people. However, the losers were allowed to worship their original gods to maintain order and avoid violence. This practice changed dramatically with the arrival of the Spanish. Soon after the establishment of the colony, Catholic priests started arriving in the New World to preach one true religion. The Spanish imposed their culture and religion on the indigenous people, destroying Aztec temples as the houses of devils and forcing the population to convert to Christianity. Thousands of native codices were burned, erasing vast amounts of cultural and historical knowledge. The new economic system introduced by Cortés was also repressive. To reward the conquistadors who helped take down the Aztec Empire, Cortés introduced the encomienda system. Under this system, conquistadors were granted control over large areas of land and the indigenous people living there. They were responsible for the native population living on it, including their safety, religion, and education. In exchange, the natives were bound to pay the conquistador with food, labor, and other goods. The encomienda system allowed the conquistadors to accumulate enormous wealth. Silver mines, particularly in Zacatecas and Guanajuato, became major sources of income. The extraction of silver and other precious metals was a grueling process that relied heavily on indigenous labor. The riches that flowed from these mines helped fuel the Spanish economy and cemented the conquistadors' power. Therefore, with the introduction of this system, Cortés killed two birds with one stone. He made conquistadors happy by bestowing vast lands on them and indirectly enacted a system to rule a large population and area. However, the conquistadors' newfound wealth and power came with significant challenges. Internal conflicts were common, as ambitious men vied for control over land, resources, and titles. Cortés himself faced numerous legal battles and accusations of misconduct. The Spanish crown, wary of the conquistadors' growing power, sought to curtail their autonomy through bureaucratic oversight and legal constraints. Some conquistadors, disillusioned with their treatment by the crown, returned to Spain seeking recognition and titles. Many found that their contributions were undervalued, and they struggled to secure the rewards they believed they deserved. This tension between the conquistadors and the crown reflected broader conflicts within the Spanish Empire regarding the control and governance of its new territories. Tales of Cortés's victory led thousands of Spanish and other wealth-hungry Europeans to the New World to get their hands on the riches just like Cortés. The destructive violence that the wealth-hungry conquistadors brought to the New World wasn't the only thing the indigenous people had to face. Diseases were another horror. Smallpox arrived on the shores of Mexico in 1520 with one of the Spanish conquistadors and soon engulfed the whole of Central America. Not only this, but it even reached the Inca Empire, which lived in the southern part of the American continent. Hundreds of millions of Mexicans were killed by the disease, with estimates saying that almost 50% of the Aztec population was wiped out of the face of the earth. Other European diseases such as measles and influenza decimated the population, with up to 90% of the indigenous people perishing within the first century of contact with Europeans. The collapse of the Aztec social structure further compounded the devastation, leaving communities vulnerable and disorganized. The encomienda system imposed a brutal regime of forced labor on the surviving indigenous populations. Men, women, and children were compelled to work in mines, fields, and workshops under harsh conditions. However, resistance persisted. Indigenous communities used various strategies to fight against Spanish domination, including revolts, fleeing to remote areas, and covertly maintaining cultural practices. Over time, a process of cultural assimilation began. The Spanish sought to convert the indigenous people to Christianity, often using forceful methods. However, this process was not entirely one-sided. Indigenous people adapted Christianity to fit their own traditions, which resulted in a syncretic blend of beliefs and practices. Efforts to preserve indigenous culture were also evident, as many communities retained their languages, customs, and knowledge. The conquest and colonization had profound socio-economic impacts. The redistribution of land through the encomienda system fundamentally altered the economic landscape, depriving indigenous communities of their traditional lands and undermining their stability. while Spanish colonialists filled their pockets with gold and other riches. New social hierarchies emerged with mestizos of mixed indigenous and Spanish ancestry, which played significant roles in colonial society. These dynamics created complex layers of identity and class in New Spain. So what do you think? Leave your comment below, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified about new videos from Binge History.